Welcome to the Apprenticeship.io podcast, where we gather the courageous leaders the tech industry needs to talk about education equity, job hunts, hiring in tech, and you guessed it, apprenticeships. Whether you're considering a career switch to tech, currently studying, or working and leading in tech, we hope to show you stories, ideas, and tactics to inspire you and equip you to make the tech industry and our future together a more equitable place for all of us. Let's get to know today's guest.
Today's guest is Roche Janken. Roche became a senior software engineer at Uber in March 2019. Roche attended Dev Bootcamp in 2015, became an apprentice software engineer and a software engineer at Uber in 2016. Roche transitioned into software engineering from a 10-year modern dance career. In her years as a professional modern dancer, she also had side hustles as a bookkeeper, a yoga instructor, and a project manager. She studied dance at the University of Michigan. Roche loves Great British Bake Off, a competitive game of Scrabble, and gardening in her backyard in Oakland with her dog and her wife. Roche's personal motto in 2021 is, "I've got nothing better to do." This episode was recorded in February 2021. So, welcome back to the podcast, Roche. It's amazing to have you.
So happy to be here.
It has been 2 years since our last episode, and it's been some wild times. There's plenty to talk about, I'm sure. What have been some of the big highlights for you over the course of since we last chatted?
Let's see. I got married. I got a second dog. I haven't changed jobs. I got promoted.
Woo!
And then I spent 11 months in my house. How's that?
Sounds about right. That's amazing. You got married. Congratulations. How is married life?
We were dating for 9 years before we got married. So about the same as pre-married life.
That makes sense. That's a long dating period too. How has it been in pandemic? Has it changed or stayed the same?
We're both working from home, and we both have jobs that, require us to sit down and focus. So for the most part, we separate in the morning and rejoin in the evening. But it's nice to have a lunch together or have a laugh, whatever, during the middle of the day. Plus, I really like being with my dogs all the time.
Yeah. I got a dog also, actually. I have a pandemic puppy. We got her in April of last year. So how is your new dog? What kind of dog is it?
He is a Chihuahua Cocker Spaniel mix. He's like probably 8 pounds. And he loves laps, snacks, and he's just such a little weirdo. It's great. So he and my other dog run around and play and take naps.
This is something about dogs having two is a definite advantage. They can keep each other company and exhaust each other. There's a lot of advantages.
Highly recommend. If you have one dog, you may as well just get two. This is my take on it.
It's only a marginal amount more of dog food also.
Especially for a tiny little Chihuahua mutt. He barely eats anything.
That's awesome. Did you adopt him or how did he come into your life?
Yes, it's actually a funny story. He's a rescue. I have an old acquaintance who is a dog foster and really was looking for her dream dog. She wanted a circus dog that she could train. She was fostering Louis and trying to figure out if he could be a circus dog. And she decided that he was not trainable, which I agree with. And he's looking for a new home. And we came in and swooped him up.
Oh my gosh. So you got a circus reject dog. First of all, there's something just that I empathize with that. I don't know why. So what was he being trained to do?
I don't know how far she got with him, honestly. He does tend to have a bit of a mind of his own. Stuff like, don't jump up on the table and eat my food while I'm in the other room. That doesn't really tend to stick with Louis. Maybe she just got the memo that he really has an independent and free spirit. I used to bring him to the office all the time, and he is such a little love bug. He would jump up on everybody's lap. I have photographs of him on every single coworker's lap. He's just like a little lap dog. He's smaller than a bread box.
Oh my gosh. And he can jump on a table?
Maybe he finds a chair on the way.
He's acrobatic, but not circus acrobatic.
Exactly.
Maybe that's his calling. It's being the one that can parkour or something.
Perfect.
I love it. Oh my goodness. And so promo, what does that entail?
So this probably happened fairly shortly after you and I spoke last. Uber has a very clearly defined job ladder for software engineers with competencies defined in a matrix across levels and different skill sets. My old manager advocated that I go for promo, and now I'm a senior software engineer. It feels just like being an L2 software engineer. No, I've been at Uber for 4.5 years now, a little bit longer. As time goes on, I just feel a little bit more comfortable, a lot more comfortable, and know stuff, have that sort of institutional knowledge. I'm able to support coworkers, help them find their way, a little bit more on like the mentorship side, the leadership side as time goes on.
It's beautiful. And you've stayed on this privacy engineering team with the same manager, or have you been shifted around in those years that you've been at Uber?
Yeah, I've been on the same team. The manager has shifted several times. So you knew Denali, the sort of first proponent of the apprenticeship program. She was my first manager at Uber. And I think now I'm on to my sixth manager on the same team. There's been a fair amount of change and transition. I guess at this point, I am the person who has been on the team the longest, closely followed by my coworker, Zach, who's technically on the product side.
That's amazing. So the shift from being the junior one on the team to being the like senior one, how has your perspective changed? The way that you relate on the team, has it shifted?
Yeah, it definitely has. I think I am starting to really see the long-term vision a little bit more. I would say before I was very much like focused on how to execute a particular project. I'm starting to see the gaps now and think about how to structure a team or a software solution to fill these larger gaps. I've also like super nerded out on privacy. I actually went and got a CIPP certification and read about privacy. I kind of became a privacy nerd, and that helps to expand my vision and think a little bit more holistically about what we can do as a team. That's been a interesting shift pretty recently, and I have a couple of colleagues who really excel in that area, so I've been inspired by them for sure.
Interesting. So what is this for those of us who aren't in privacy? What is CIPP certification? What is that?
It's a certified information privacy professional, and it's a certification given by the International Association of Privacy Professionals. It's mostly a certification that like lawyery type people will get, but Uber was offering Uber employees the opportunity to take the class and take the test. I just kind of was like, why not? Unless you're really into privacy, I wouldn't recommend it. It was very legally focused. Definitely fell asleep with my face on the book many nights. Ended up getting like a really great flashcard app, which kind of got me across the finish line. But I think even if, the details about which states in the United States allow employers to have video footage of employees or whatever, like the detailed privacy laws are, it just gave me a broader overview of what the landscape in privacy is like. And then, of course, within Uber, we're basically wrangling a huge engineering org into some of these privacy controls and solutions.
That's very interesting intersection between tech policy and tech implementation.
Definitely. That's one of the things about it that's really fun for me is I work with wonderful engineers all the time. I work with wonderful lawyers all the time, or program managers who aren't lawyers, but lawyer friends, and then other engineers on other teams who have these features that use private data or don't use private data. It feels like it flexes some of my non-engineer muscles, which of course I like.
That sounds really philosophically, ethically interesting as well. What is the best solution, or what are the trade-offs that we might have to make balancing between ideal and the possible?
Yeah, it's really tricky. I think most of the users of the internet are so accustomed to the convenience that they get from having their personal data be used pretty heavily by companies. Like when you open Instagram, if you see ads that have nothing to do with you, like WTF, right? What the hell? Whereas when they understand who you are by tracking you across the internet, which is so creepy, then you get these customized ads and maybe you feel a little bit more seen, which is weird. It's all pretty tricky.
Yeah, I would identify as a millennial who is kind of just throwing my hands in the air. Is there anything I can possibly do to make this situation better? I don't know. Is the jury out on whether or not they're listening to us? Because I feel like they're listening. There's times where I'll say something verbally and then the ads will show up the same day. What do you think people need to know about privacy that you see missing?
Yeah, that's a great question. Even though I work in privacy, I would say that my attitude towards my personal privacy is probably quite similar to yours. I think a lot more about like how Uber can be a good steward of the data that Uber needs to get people where they're going, and less so about my own personal privacy, which is probably because I'm not at risk, which is very privileged and fortunate. My sense these days is that a lot of the sort of protection in the privacy space will not come from users. It will come from governments enforcing regulations and requiring that platforms and companies actually follow through on their word or follow whatever sort of regulations are out there. Some nice big GDPR fines or CCPA fines or FTC audits and consent decrees. I think more of that will be a better protection than like Cam deleting her Facebook and all of her Facebook data, for example. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Which, by the way, I did that in the time since we chatted last.
Yes.
Got off of Facebook, deleted the data. Don't know if it actually is deleted, but some of those hearings that happened since we last chatted, those were wild. I worry a lot for the kids who their whole history, their entire lives are on the internet. But for me, it was like, okay, I deleted my MySpace, I deleted my college Facebook, and then I deleted my post-college Facebook. And now I just am trying to figure out, I think, how to make the internet a better place. That's something I spend a lot of time thinking about these days. And what you just said about needing to be engaged with policy and with governance, I feel like, especially because of the election and what's happened in the United States, it seems so top of mind, at least for me. Do you see your work heading that direction, or how do you see yourself contributing in light of all the recent events? Has the way you show up changed in light of the pandemic?
Jury's out. Jury is totally out on that one. I feel like I'm at a place where I have all questions and no answers. For example, the whole Parler situation is so tricky, right? You have a social media platform. It's basically based on libertarian ideals and privacy protection that gets heavily used by extremists and then gets taken down off the internet. All that doesn't seem like a great story. None of that is great. Nobody did the right thing there, but I don't quite have my head wrapped around a better way yet. Although I do think that platforms should be held responsible. I don't think that we can find all the individuals. I just don't think we can. I don't think we can find every human who's like uploading a shitty video onto Facebook or YouTube or whatever. I just don't think that will scale. So I do think that the platforms will have to exercise some control, but then who decides what that is? And it gets really tricky. I have no answers.
Did you watch the documentary Social Dilemma that came out?
I have not. I've heard so many good things about it, but I only watch Great British Bake Off.
It's worth watching for sure. But one of the metaphors or comparisons I've seen lately, especially during the pandemic, has been this idea that when cities were first built, we had all of these issues of how does plumbing work? How does waste management work, both for excrement and also for garbage, and for the idea that there are firefighters that the public pays for because it's in everyone's best interest to have someone who can go from saving your cat in the tree to helping put out a massive fire. These are all things that the public has contributed to building over time. And right now we're grappling with that process on the internet. Last time I checked, I think it was like a third of the world participating in this grand experiment of being connected. Maybe it's more now. Is it more like 2/3 of the world's population are on the internet? Anyway, a lot of people. And like, how do we govern? How do we have public services? How do we firefight and make sure that it's a safe place for people? It's
Totally.
super interesting work. So you and I chatted last time about the fact that your brother is also in this work. So how do you and your brother still help each other along? What's that relationship like now that you're deeper into your career in privacy engineering?
Yeah, he has definitely been there for me when I need advice more from a career perspective. Maybe once or twice in the last 5 years, I've hit him up with a technical question. More so when I'm trying to kind of navigate a sort of career direction moment, I will call for his perspective. He's very opinionated, which is what it is. He has strong opinions, so I can always trust him to have an opinion about whatever I'm asking, regardless of whether it's a good one.
That's awesome. That sounds like what I would expect from a sibling relationship.
He's a good guy. Maybe a year ago, my manager inquired if I was ready to move towards management. And at the time, I was curious about it, but I was pretty sure that I didn't want to. And that's when I give my brother a call and we can talk it all out. It's really helpful.
I was going to ask you about that because I know that's a thing that tends to happen as you start to advance is like management versus technical track. So I was curious to catch up with you on that as well. What's your philosophy about it? Or maybe do you have a philosophy about it? How are you thinking about your career now?
Yeah, it's actually been interesting, and I would say maybe a little bit of an inflection point for me recently. So at Uber, every 6 months, we do a performance review cycle and a promotion cycle. So people will give reviews to all their colleagues, and some people will get nominated for promotion, and you'll be writing in favor of somebody's promotion. And so I'm writing my own performance review, self-evaluation, and just looking at what I've spent the last year doing. And I notice that more and more of my time is in the sort of buckets of mentorship, citizenship, leadership, trying to move some D&I initiatives forward, some of the higher level planning for my particular subset of privacy at Uber. I was thinking about what feels important to me and what I've been feeling called to do recently. I thought, oh, maybe I should start to think about management. Up until recently, I was more like, oh, coding is so peaceful. It's so wonderful. It's just me and my computer and the code and the unit tests. And yet I feel like if I want to make tech a better place in a significant way, the way to do that is by moving in the direction of manager. There's a limited impact I can have as an individual contributor. I'm talking with my manager about it. We're coming up with a plan in progress.
Absolutely. I love it. It's totally not something that is ever, I think, fully clear. Like it's always part of the journey that you're figuring it out. So it's awesome that you're seeing where it goes and feeling it out day by day.
There was a tech talk at Uber where a staff software engineer was talking, staff meaning the fanciest of all the software engineers, was talking about their journey. And they said that they had thought about management and their manager had given them this concept of the toothbrush test, which I thought was really interesting, where you're brushing your teeth. What are you thinking about while you're brushing your teeth? Are you thinking about engineering problems? Are you thinking about people problems? That can be a way to understand where your heart is. I just thought it was neat.
I like that. That's very interesting. I feel like that's something that can shift depending on where you're at in life, taking stock of where your mind goes when it wanders as a way of getting in touch with yourself. That's very beautiful. Do you want to talk about current events? Like the election and the insurrection and all those things?
I don't have a lot of interesting things to say about current events, but I do have an interest in talking about diversity in tech and what's going on in this country when it comes to racial justice.
Yes. The summer was a very difficult thing to watch from afar, being quarantined in Brazil. And I can only imagine what it was like within cities where there were protests happening very regularly. It also seemed as though the media just quit covering what was happening, which makes me sad. My observation from the ongoing Black Lives Matter movement is these problems have shown themselves so clearly, and I feel a struggle for how to make lasting change. I think some of the movements towards abolishing the police and defunding the police, they were on point. And then we also had comments from, most notably for me was when Barack Obama said, more or less, this will never happen. That was the moment for me where I was just like, how do we hold people accountable? I think that's January 2021. The theme is accountability. Curious for you, what did you witness? Maybe is a good place to start. You're based in Oakland, so curious what you experienced. And then what do you think we do moving forward? How are you thinking about things?
The answer to your first question, what did I experience, is like in person, not much. My partner and I are like very not going out of our house right now. We definitely were discussing, do we go to some of these protests or not? Neither of us were comfortable with taking that sort of health risk, which of course I have mixed feelings about, but that's where we ended up and that's where we are. I don't have a strong vision for where we go from here, and I don't necessarily know that I am the person who would have that vision. I have been participating in a working group within Uber to advance racial equity. There's actually, as you would hope, been like a ton of energy in that direction. There's like a engineering effort, there's a product effort, there's a safety and security effort, a lot of efforts that I'm not even naming. A lot of smart people, passionate people trying to move the needle. If I could wave a magic wand, I would just get 5x the number of full-time paid staff to work on D&I. We have some amazing D&I folks at Uber. I know their team was affected by the layoffs last spring, as were many teams. But now that we're coming around the corner, the folks I know on the D&I team are just superhuman, doing more work than can reasonably be done. I hope that Uber invests more when it comes to paid staff doing this work, because volunteer efforts like the one that I'm involved in, they have the benefit of having some subject matter experts. I'm working with other people in the trust and safety org. We have a lot of really interesting perspectives, people from the US, people from abroad, people like me who are like total lefties, ex-law enforcement, ex-military. We're like all sitting down at the table thinking about how to protect Black lives and make trust and security a better place for people of color to be. But I think that you just need some people who it's their whole job. So that's my take.
This is something I've been thinking about a lot related to the idea of our systemic failures and why do we have this history, especially in the United States, of treating systemic failures as charity cases as opposed to the very challenging, complex issues that they are, especially related to apprenticeships. The more that I've been in this work, the more that I realize it's a long game. There's a lot of accountability that needs to happen on the governance side and then also with employers in order for there to be an actual apprenticeship system in the United States. I find myself banging my head against the wall. I recently am in the process of incorporating Apprenticeship.io as a nonprofit. I just have all these feelings about it because I'm like, I think it has to be that way because I've tried so many other angles to get this work moving forward. And at the same time, I'm still just similar to you. This needs to just be resourced. Just put our money towards this. Otherwise,
Yes.
It's going to continue to grapple with issues like the student loan crisis and underemployment and unemployment and terrible college completion rates and people dropping out in droves from college. Like, for me, that's such a real issue that I am thinking about all the time in this work.
And a huge part of why diversity in tech is challenging is because of sourcing and hiring, in my opinion. There is few underrepresented minorities at Uber compared to the population of the cities that we serve. It's just so disheartening to see the numbers stay pretty static. My team does this team interview for incoming managers. So if we are hiring a manager for my team, there's a panel of engineers who does a small team interview for this manager. Well, one of our questions is, tell me about a time you managed a diverse team. I would say the majority of the experienced managers who we have asked that question, they just don't have an answer because they've never managed a diverse team. And that, first of all, is like mind-blowing. Second of all, like I think about like, can that be a deal breaker? My team at Uber is pretty diverse, I think, compared with many teams I've seen in tech. And I think not everyone is good at managing a diverse team, but if somebody hasn't done it before, how do you know if they can? You wouldn't hire a manager who had never managed. Why would you hire a manager who had never managed a diverse team? Because they've never had the opportunity. It's so tricky. I found it very surprising when we started asking that question and seeing that people just didn't have an answer.
Yeah, I feel like we're grappling with it at a society level too, just realizing that we're quite polarized in the United States and not functioning in a way that's interconnected. We're doing this like massive multicultural experiment, but haven't quite caught up to having people's lived experience feel as multicultural as our aspirations. It's this idealism that is built into the United States in general and how it impacts the tech industry and how we solve it is very interesting. How do you see yourself, or how do you see your work going forward? Like, how would you want to address it? Apprenticeship being obviously one of the things that I think we're both fans of, but is there anything in light of the problems you just showed us? Like, how are you thinking it can be solved?
My creativity like extends to what I can do within Uber at this point in my life. So like you said, apprenticeship programs, one thing that Uber is implementing, an apprenticeship program that is strong is a positive thing.
In the meantime, we can acknowledge that there are a lot of folks like us getting in through the back door, the side door, who are coming back to their love of technology after maybe a career in something else because nobody ever encouraged them or supported them, and sitting behind a computer and coding all day didn't fit with the stereotypes of what we see in the media. I think showing up the way that you're showing up now as a senior engineer, no less, it's so exciting.
Thanks. Trying to just make it a little bit better.
We have a really funny bit in the last episode where you were talking about inverting yourself in the office. To me, it's like classic Silicon Valley. When you take breaks, you have hands in the bathroom. So I guess, what are you doing now in your home office? That's been one of the really challenging aspects of pandemic. Personally, I find myself sitting behind the computer, only drinking coffee, not feeding myself. Habits are a real struggle during quarantine. How have you adjusted your habits, and how do you take breaks?
I am fairly fortunate in this regard. I'm a very habit-driven person. I have a daily rhythm that I fall into pretty regularly. I get up at 6:45. I am at my computer at 8. I sign off at 4 and go outside. That's my deal. In the morning, I try to not have meetings and have coding time. In the afternoons, I have meetings with colleagues, like one-on-ones or project check-ins. My partner, I would say she peer pressured me before we got married to purchase a treadmill, which she really wanted to have like her wedding body. And I was like, oh God, am I going to have a giant piece of exercise equipment in my house? Well, now I'm glad because I have made myself a little walking desk. So while I'm doing my coding in the morning, strolling on my treadmill, listening to some music, and then like I said, I try to sign off at 4. You got to get the sun before the sun goes down, and it gets cold. It's the Bay Area. As soon as the sun goes down, it's freezing. So it feels like there's enough urgency there that it's pretty easy for me to close the lid of my computer and walk away. And then sometimes I'll hop back on for a minute in the evening if a coworker sends me a Slack message. I literally have nothing better to do. That's one of my quarantine quotes. Anything, it's fine. I have nothing better to do. I also tend to have things I like to do other than compute, and that helps.
Absolutely. I feel like the hours spent in front of a screen just went up so much during pandemic for me. Envisioning you every day sitting out in the sunshine, like what a beautiful thing to do for yourself.
It's mostly like weeding, a lot of weeding, some planting, not as much sitting, but yes, sunshine, wind, good smells, dogs frolicking through the grass, eating tomatoes off the vine, living the Oakland life.
Yes. I love it. And can I clarify, when you close that laptop at 4, this is something I struggle with to this day. And also something I've recently uncovered is actually Mac users' problem. Do you have 80 million tabs open all the time and keep your computer on all the time? Or do you have a habit? Because this is another like simple luxury that I fantasize about. Closing the tabs, turning off the computer. Do you do that? What do you do?
I do not power down my computer. I also have pretty good tab hygiene. There's a Chrome extension, which I think recently had some security issues, but I would still recommend you can do your own investigation, called the Great Suspender, that suspends your tabs to help your computer be less overwhelmed by all the open tabs. Closing my computer is as far as I get.
Same. Okay. It's a fantasy I have, but not a reality. I'll check out this Chrome extension though. So when you say suspend, what you're, I think, meaning is like the computing power, God knows what technical processes are happening to keep the page running. Like it's keeping the tabs open, but like redirecting the RAM or whatever it might be.
Your guess is as good as mine.
Okay. Because there's another one that I've heard of, OneTab. Have you heard of this?
I have heard of that. I haven't used it. One of my colleagues recommended it to me, actually.
I've used it. It gives me a lot of anxiety because it will close all the tabs at once. And I know in my head it's storing all of them and it's keeping track of all of them for me. But the anxiety of watching it close all my tabs at once, it's like that feeling where you accidentally click like the red close button when you have all the tabs. Horror.
Yeah.
The other Chrome extension that I downloaded recently that I can highly recommend is the newsfeed killer. It will basically eliminate the infinite scroll. Infinite scroll is not a good thing for the human brain. There are basically Chrome extensions that specifically eliminate the infinite scroll on news feeds and just allow you peace of nothingness.
I was experiencing so much anxiety prior to the election that I was like, my brain was just mush. And I found myself checking Facebook during work hours, like every 12 seconds, which is not my MO. I installed a Chrome extension that every time I typed in the Facebook URL, it redirected me to a page of random animals, which was really way better. If I open it right now, it's going to show me a jerboa, a hamster, a mouse, an oryx, a puppy, and a hippopotamus. Way better than Facebook. Cute random animals. It's winning.
Wow. Is it like a grid of all of those animals?
Yeah, this Chrome extension will just send you to any website that you say. So what is this Chrome extension? It's called BlockSite. And the website that I told it to send me to is randomlists.com/random animals. Ooh, now it has a civet. See, things I never even knew existed. Thorny devil.
That's amazing. I love it. So the other thing we actually chatted about last time was your desire to illustrate technical documentation. Have you been able to carpe diem and start being an illustrator of technical docs?
I have not. I'll tell you something though. It made me happy and sad at the same time. I actually had a resurgence of interest in doing this in the winter of last year. I've actually reached out to a friend of mine who's more in the art world, and I was like, do you know any animators who might be like psyched about a side project? And my friend introduced me to another friend, and I reached out to them, and I like totally couldn't afford it. I was like, I'm so glad that animators make so much money. So I'm going to have to come back to it at some point when I have a stupid amount of money to just throw at random stuff because I want to, which will probably be never. Or when I find a really amazing animator who just decides they want to do this as their side project. Or when I decide I want to become an animator and spend more time in front of a computer. There's a lot of options, but the short answer is there has been no progress. Although one of my coworkers did send me a tech talk that I didn't hate, which I was pretty excited about. Usually I think that they're so boring, but this one was really good. It was entertaining and I was surprised. Let me see if I can find it for you.
There's one that I reference regularly that's about how like quirky JavaScript is. We can put these in the show notes as follow-up. It's basically just a guy going through all of the quirks of JavaScript. And as a learner, I was like, A, this is funny. And B, like, I need to learn all of JavaScript's quirks because this is my life. Debugging is like, what is going on? It's a great way to just check, okay, did I think of that thing that JavaScript does? No. Okay. Did I think of that thing as he's going through all of his jokes? That leads me to the next question, which is, what are you working in?
Yeah, I am working mostly in Java. I did put up a diff in Go today, but I sent it to the service owners and I was like, please take what I have done and make it your own since I don't remember any of the conventions of Go. And Uber has some data pipelining tools that I've been using a little bit more lately. A lot of Java, I have to say, I prefer Java to JavaScript. It's a little bit stodgy, but I don't mind.
What do you mean stodgy? I have seen and not used, thanks to CS50 at Harvard, C, and I conceptually understand the idea of memory allocation, which I believe is also a thing in Java.
Not something that I have had to deal with for the most part.
Excellent.
I would describe it as stodgy because it's strongly typed. I don't know what else to say about it. It just feels like do anything in Java compared to Go, but I also feel like I'm less likely to barf, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. So for our beginners, what we're talking about is it's a lot of words and it's very particular about the words and symbols and broadly text being written. It's very particular about those things being in specific places or correctly put together, as opposed to Ruby or JavaScript. We'll make an assumption that you meant this and go forward without throwing an error. Okay, I can totally imagine this world of Java code that you are inhabiting.
For a person who likes to sit down at 8 a.m. and stand up at 4 p.m., Java is perfect. It just works well for me.
That's awesome. If you were going to reach back and send a message to, let's say, your dev bootcamp self, is there anything you would say to that version of Roche? What are the things you wish you had when you were more junior?
I think I would tell my dev bootcamp self that I am going to enjoy this even more than I thought I was. Not just like the work itself, but also the people that I meet. I have met, I thought that I was going to enter a new phase of my life surrounded by people who I didn't connect with on like a social or emotional level, but that has proven not to be the case. I think the stereotype has not been my lived experience, which is great. I've met really wonderful people who I really enjoy. I would make sure that my past self knew that because I was definitely pretty nervous about that as I was coming into tech. And in terms of tools, I think this is going to sound maybe a little bit pithy, but stuff like having a lot of keyboard shortcuts that you use in your IDE or your editor that make it easy to develop. I use a tool called FlyCut, which is like a clipboard where you can store like 40 things instead of just one. I use it like every single day, 100 times. It makes it so much easier. I don't know how people code without it. Or having a good window manager. When I'm mentoring people on my team and we're pairing and they're not using tools like this, I am a butt about it. You've got to get your tool set up because if you want to have this creative process where you're writing code and you're in the flow, you don't all of a sudden want to have to be dealing with all this cumbersome copy pasting or trying to figure out where your windows are or where your tabs are. I, certainly have colleagues who are even more devoted to this practice than I am, but I think it's worth taking the time to set yourself up.
Spoken like a true senior engineer.
Gosh. Yeah.
Like you're speaking my worst nightmares, because I'm like, I am 100% the person who like still doesn't have my keyboard shortcuts for Sublime Text memorized, like also have a ton of imposter syndrome around not using Vim or Studio Code yet.
It's worth the investment into like the time investment.
What I hear you saying is like, pay attention to your workflow, pay attention to your habits, because your habits will become a system, and your system over time is going to be the thing that gives you a lot of efficiency and potentially makes your life more joyful. And makes
coding is annoying sometimes. So when you can control things and make them less annoying, take the opportunity.
Absolutely. We can do like a lightning round of just incredibly random things that I can think about.
You are the boss. I follow your lead.
Okay, let's think here. How do you think about your continuing education right now? What does like your learning look like now?
Yeah, one thing that I have learned about myself is I'm more motivated to learn something when I know it's going to be immediately applicable to the work that I'm doing. So for example, my team, I'm on privacy, my sub-team is focused on deletion, and we have been working on a project to do data deletion in the data warehouse. And so to do that, we had to learn about Spark. That is how my learning has been focused, is around the edge of what I'm doing for the work that I do for my job. That's kind of just who I am. There's just so much. I feel like there's so much work to do and there's so many different technologies. I don't know that there's really a wrong answer. If you follow where you're moved, I think you'll probably find a lot there.
Amen. And I think what I take away from your story, having seen a part of your journey, is like you following this kind of maybe a whisper or like a quiet curiosity that was present for you. As you mentioned, like having fear about whether or not it would pay off in the long term. And then now seeing you, I'm like, oh my God, it paid off so much in the long term. She's like so passionate and interested in what you're doing for now what has turned into 5 years, and you're still at it. I think a lot of folks, myself included, have this fear of, if I just follow the thing that's quiet, or if I invest in a curiosity that I have, is that a risk and is it going to pay off? I can say from my own coding journey, since we last chatted, like the only thing I wish is that I did it sooner. Like I wish I quit my job and just done it sooner, because even if I don't find myself in a software engineering job right now, or came back from my sabbatical during a pandemic, like not ideal circumstances at all.
Totally.
I don't regret it. Like I just wish I did it sooner. I want to impart that upon the folks who might be listening, because that's the thing that so many other people struggle with, that seems to be just so beautifully represented in your story and in how you're moving forward.
Totally agree. There's so much of interest in the world of technology, regardless of kind of your angle, whether you want to write code or whether it's more about the product or you want to work for the government and think about technology policy. There's just so much there. There's so much that's interesting. I wish I had known, like you said, I'm not going to say I wish I had done it sooner, but I wish I had really had a sense of how interesting it was when I was younger, because there's just so much cool stuff that's happening.
Amen. That's 100% true. I remember doing HTML and CSS on MySpace, and I still find myself doing that exact same stuff that I used to do when I was a teenager. I'm still interested in it. Some things stay fascinating throughout our lives. Awesome. Cool. I can't think of a lightning round, although I really want. Creative juices. It's Friday evening. I don't know if I can muster. Let's see. What's your favorite color? Pink. I love it. I would not have expected that. That's a surprise. I don't know why I wouldn't think your favorite color is pink.
It's like the Aerosmith song. Look it up. Look it up.
Look it up. What is your favorite programming language that you've used so far?
Probably Java. That's embarrassing.
Ooh, people. This is great. I'm enjoying this. Let's see if I can think of it. I'm doing the worst lightning round ever. This is why you have to plan in advance. Lightning rounds have to be fast. I am failing. Lightning round is just not lightning. It's
Some days there's no lightning. Hey Siri, what are some good lightning round questions?
What's your favorite board game?
I like Monopoly and Scrabble. They're fun for me because I always win, but they're not fun for the people that I play it with because I'm not always very nice when I win. So usually I just play dominoes.
Okay, noted. You're a fierce competitor. I see. What about favorite video games or computer games?
I don't actually play video games or computer games. Yeah.
Good. I downloaded some of the ones from my teenage years on my computer because that's a thing that folks can do when you're in quarantine during a pandemic. So I have Roller Coaster Tycoon and StarCraft.
Trouble.
Don't do it, people. Don't do it. Though not having Sims is fantastic. If you could go anywhere in the world right now, sans pandemics, like safely with your partner, where would you go?
We had a whole plan that last year was going to be our year to travel, which obviously didn't happen. So we have a list, and the list is topped with Egypt, Turkey, and Morocco.
Those are some of my favorites. Okay, so I've been to Morocco, highly recommend it. Turkey is very high on my list. So what I'm observing there is intersections of cultures.
Nailed it. Precisely. Yes, completely.
Ooh, it's so good. Croatia is another one that I feel like has some intersections of cultures. But yeah, the three you just named. Egypt is also super, super high on my list.
One day.
Indeed. Is there a beauty routine or self-care routine during quarantine that you really enjoy?
I like to watch TikTok while I brush my teeth because I think it's entertaining, and then I brush my teeth for longer so my teeth are cleaner. So it's TikTok and teeth time every night. I just sit down for 8, 10, 30 minutes, very clean teeth, watch TikTok, so much entertaining stuff.
I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about Great British Bake Off, which I will admit I watched a couple of episodes of, got some laughs, and then did not continue with my obsession. What's some of the things that you think that they have to cook that are the most fun to watch?
Oh, man.
It's tough, right?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I really enjoy the episodes where they make really elaborate sculptural cakes or pastries. Like the last episode I watched, the Showstopper Challenge, was to make a picnic basket where all the foods were made of other foods. So something that looked like a peach but was actually like a dinner roll, for example. And I just look at those and I'm like, that is incredible. I also don't like stressful television at all. So Great British Bake Off just nails. It's like fun. There's a little bit of drama. It's creative, but there's like really no stress, and everybody's nice to each other. Like I tried to watch a normal television show the other day, and I like actually turned it off. I just couldn't hang. So all about the Great British Bake Off. I also like never cook anything that they make because my partner doesn't eat wheat or dairy or basically or sugar. So I'm really just like watching and enjoying.
Wow. Yeah, my follow-up question was going to be, have you attempted any of this baking? Because I have made numerous mistakes. My family will probably not listen to this, but if they did, they would be like, if Cammie doesn't mention the fact that she's like really ruined a lot of different baking dishes that I've attempted. I'm famous in my family, like within 10 people for, it's not famous, but I made these greasy brownies with my cousins when I was babysitting them once. I put 4 extra cups. I will never live it down. I found admiration for people who bake because my observation is it's people who are very good at attention to detail and following directions. And these are 2 of my weaknesses.
I do okay with baking when I do it, which is not very often. My favorite thing to make actually is popovers. because they're very easy and you can make exactly the right amount for one person to eat when they come right out of the oven, which is good because I can eat them, but my partner can't. You toss like an egg and a cup of flour and a cup of milk in the blender with some salt, and then you just put it in a muffin tin. Look up a recipe. It's super easy and like tastes so good. Low effort, high reward. Highly recommend popovers.
Wow, that sounds really cool. And it sounds like you have it pretty memorized how to make them.
You probably look up the recipe. I'm not so confident on the ratios, but give or take.
Always look up the recipe. I'm the person who's sitting there, oh, baking powder and baking soda are the same thing. So I'll just switch them around, or I'll add a little bit more baking powder instead of soda. Don't.
Not quite. Not quite.
So now it's been 2 years. You are a senior software engineer. Are there any inspirational words, final thoughts? In our last episode, you graciously invited absolutely everyone to come visit you in the Uber office. Curious how you'd like to close things up this time. Is everyone invited to your house, Roche?
We have a lot of alcohol left over from our wedding. Plenty of space in the yard for social distancing. Come on by. Give you like a bottle of wine and a lawn chair for sure.
What are your inspiring words of wisdom? It's like a mini graduation speech, maybe to the aspiring apprentices, folks who might be affected by the pandemic, who might be thinking about retraining, all the folks on their journey.
Tech desperately needs you. Tech needs you. Please come. No, that's not fair because tech also isn't ready for you, probably at the same time, not at the scale that it should be.
That was exactly what I would have said, and also very honest.
Connect with people who are doing things that are of interest, because especially like women and non-binary people connecting with other women and non-binary people, maybe allow the male allies into the party, whatever. I feel like the connections that I've made with women and non-binary people just continue to be really inspiring to me.
Do that. I love it. Thank you so much, Roche. It's always a pleasure. You always amaze and inspire. And I'm just going back to the fact that you have a circus dog. Like, that was such a delightful surprise.
Thank you. You are also incredibly inspiring. Hope that you're going to, interview yourself in one of these.
Just record myself answering my own question. That would be funny.
That's fine.
That would be very much like pandemic edition. This is what I've become.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Apprenticeship.io podcast. You can learn more about apprenticeships and find us online at www.apprenticeship.io. Don't forget to follow us on Spotify and subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. Want to get a shout out on the podcast or support our work? Become a patron at www.patreon.com/apprenticeship.io. Until next time, we're rooting for you.